Welcome to Rooted to Thrive, conversations to elevate our humanity. I'm your host, Rochelle Peterson-Ansari, Professor P for short. This is your podcast sanctuary for cultivating mindsets and skills to elevate our shared humanity. We're taking a deep dive into practical strategies to evolve as anti-racist, culturally competent, and inclusive individuals and leaders. In each episode, we're bringing you real-world examples and actionable takeaways. We're going to talk about personal growth, fostering connection, and creating positive change that dismantles systemic barriers and creates environments where all of us are valued, empowered, and activate our collective power. This is Rooted to Thrive. Hi there. Welcome and welcome back to everyone joining us on Rooted to Thrive, Conversations to Elevate Our Humanity podcast. I'm your host, Rochelle Peterson-Ansari, aka Professor P. And today we have Luca Poxon, project coordinator for programs at Temple University and Philly Children's Movement. And today we're going to dive deep into joy and justice-centered practices in education to counter dehumanizing systems. I absolutely love it. So Luca and we know each other through the Pennsylvania Educator Diversity Consortium. That's where we first met. And we've gotten to know each other more deeply through a community of practice for teacher educators in that organization. It has been an honor to get to know Luca. That's why I invited Luca to this podcast. Luca keeps it real. I sense your genuine commitment to children, to youth, to education. And I wanted to talk to you on the podcast, and I think other people should hear from you too. So I am honored to have this conversation with you today. How you doing?
I'm good, and I am so honored to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, I'm excited because, like I said, we're going to be unpacking joy and justice centered practices in education. So let's get started. Share a little bit about your background and how you got involved in this work.
Sure, thank you. I am from Oakland, California. That is where I was born. I was technically born in Berkeley, but raised in Oakland, in the Fruitvale neighborhood, if listeners are familiar with where that is. Um, I was very interested in education and kids and working with kids from a young age. And in high school, I had the opportunity to volunteer at a school near my house, where I really started to become more deeply aware of inequities and kind of some of the more complex sociopolitical elements of education. That led me to pursue a degree in educational studies from Swarthmore College. And I was particularly interested in their program because they have a focus on race and anti-racism in education. And that was something that was really appealing to me. Um, and then from there, I connected with a now really wonderful friend and mentor, Dr. Jen Bradley. And she has been my connection to both the Philly Children's Movement and my current role through Temple University as the project coordinator of the Pennsylvania Teacher Education Culturally Relevant and Sustaining Education Initiative, which is a very long name, but that is related to the community of practice that Rochelle mentioned.
Yes, and so this is interesting. Okay, so first of all, I don't know, or maybe I forgot that we share something in common. So my master's degree is in ed studies from the University of Vermont.
Cool.
Yes.
I didn't know that.
I wish they did have a focus on anti-racism. I had to carve that in myself, but this was, the before time. And so in Swarthmore down the street, well, in a nearby county for me. But I love that you mentioned you were something lit up for you in high school when you were volunteering and you were becoming more aware of inequities in education? What were
Mhm.
some of those things?
Yeah, I wish I kind of had clearer memory of that time in my life, to be honest,
Mm,
but um, I had been searching. I'd always wanted to volunteer, and I had never had the opportunity to do that before high school. Um, and when I finally had that chance to work, particularly it was with third and fourth graders to start, and then I later worked with kindergartners. I connected really deeply with a few students. I was doing kind of one-on-one reading support with them. And they were very honest, as kids tend to be. They just lay it out there. They say how things are. And some of the things that they told me about the ways that their teachers talked to them just really did not feel okay to me. Um,
mhm,
and I later kind of developed a better understanding of the pressures that those teachers were facing and why it was complicated. It was hard for all parties. But the students described things like their teachers really talking in dehumanizing ways to them, um, kind
mhm,
of kind of categorizing them in certain ways that were not accurate or really understanding of the fullness of who they were. And I was upset by that.
mhm,
It didn't feel right. It didn't feel good. It didn't feel okay.
mhm.
Um, and I started to read. I started to read Frary and all these, different scholars because it felt like there must be something bigger going on.
Mhm.
Um, and that, yeah, the rest is history. That was
Yeah.
how things got started.
Yes, thank you for that. And for our listeners, I think, especially if there's teachers out there, I believe that there are people doing the best that they can with what they know. However, it's hard for them to conceptualize what they're doing that's dehumanizing.
Mhm.
And so I was curious if you can recall even one incident, or maybe it's something that is in your more recent memory or recent experience around what dehumanizing language looks like or sounds like. What does categorizing people in ways that did not, I believe your wording was, encompass all of who they were? What does that look like?
A really great question.
Mhm,
Um, One example from my high school volunteering experience was I worked with a student who shared um, that his math teacher would laugh at him when he got an answer wrong publicly and kind of do that kind of public shaming. Um, and this was a student who was so brilliant and just lit up when he talked about the things that he cared about, but was feeling beaten down by the teacher and feeling shamed. Um, in my college years, I volunteered doing what was called youth courts, kind of a restorative justice model, which I could say a lot more about that as a model of restorative justice and kind of keeping things within the court judicial kind of framework. Um, but there was one really striking class experience where a student had gotten into trouble in some kind of way and was participating in the youth court to try to restore the harm that was done. Um, and I don't remember the details of the situation, but by the end of it, they were like sobbing in tears. Um, the classmates who were supposed to kind of do fact-finding questions and ask more to help clarify and reach a resolution in the situation had been quiet, and it turned into the teacher just kind of interrogating the student. Um, Really not the point of the model of restorative justice at all. Really far from kind of democratic, community-based kind of framework that it was supposed to be, and it became an interrogation. And this, I think, fourth or fifth grader um, was was felt under scrutiny and punished and all of the things that it was not supposed to be, and was crying and really, really upset. And at the end, the teacher turned to the volunteers and said, "Well, he won't do that again." Like,
mm,
as if that had been a success. Um, and I could barely stand to continue working with that program after that because it felt like such a misuse and co-opting of what it was supposed to be. And clearly I understand now more that there's so much, more education that we could have done to help the teacher better understand. And there were a lot of issues that could have prevented that in the first place. Um, but those are a couple of things that come to mind in terms of like dehumanization of students.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for that clarification because I find that I know that educators, particularly in the pre-K to 12 spaces, are under a lot of pressure to move quickly and are often put in defense mode, and it doesn't create space for them to actually slow down and look at what is causing some of the behaviors they
Yeah.
exhibit. And they're in cultures often that want to blame the child, blame their families for everything, as if
Yes.
it's not a relationship where there are two accountable or two or more accountable parties.
Yeah, for
Yeah, so I
sure.
appreciate that. Thank you so much. Well, those are some of the common challenges that we encounter, right, in schools. Are there any other common challenges you encounter in promoting um, anti-racist, culturally competent strategies? Or just the general cultural competence and anti-racism of educators? Any other common challenges come to mind?
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking about this question because I think we're in a challenging time right now,
Mm,
and I don't even need to say that. We all know that. And I want to think about challenges beyond the moment that we're in, and that can kind of feel challenging in itself. Um, I really think about so many systems and structures within education that are just not set up for humanization of teachers or students,
mm,
and systems and structures that don't allow those two parties to understand or really see each other.
mhm,
Um, Often I think that kind of looks like really large class sizes,
mm,
scripted curriculum or curriculum that is not place-based or doesn't allow teachers to have agency and really know their students and incorporate their students' identities and experiences and communities into the learning. Um, and also really just like lack of support for students, communities, and families beyond school, so that students don't come to school in the best place for learning because they're dealing with so much other stuff. And then that transfers pressure to the teachers who have to wear so many hats in order to be able to meet the needs of their learners and have less
mm.
time to do some of the deeper work that they could be doing.
Right, right. And so you mentioned scripted curriculum, you mentioned large class sizes as common challenges, but then also, and I would say large class sizes are more typical in public and urban large systems
Right.
where people are trying to standardize as much as possible because it's a large system.
Right.
However, in my experience, when we've made larger systems smaller, right, like looked at communities, smaller communities across systems, and worked with people to customize it really, right, to the needs of their community. Because after all, a school is a major resource in a community, right? But to also even see themselves that way
Right.
has helped a lot of organizations or educational organizations shift and thrive. Have you witnessed any successful initiatives or programs that you've led or been a part of that have countered these challenges, whether it's the scripted curriculum, the class sizes, or
Yeah,
support in the community? Mhm.
that's a great question. Yeah. Um, I think one key element to think about is that a lot of initiatives in education and kind of the nonprofit sector of the society that we live in
Mhm.
um, are dictated by funding.
Yeah.
And so that can mean that they are short-lived. There's funding for a project, it goes well, hopefully, and then it ends. And I think that really sustainable change and movement towards more humanizing systems and ways of relating to each other requires longer term work than that. So some of the most successful stuff that I've seen has come out of longer term community work.
Okay.
Um, one example that comes to mind in particular is with an organization that I'm project coordinator for, the Philly Children's Movement. We have offered, instead of kind of singular workshops or trainings for educators around culturally responsive teaching, anti-racism in education, we offer a series of workshops that can last over multiple years. And in one case, we were also able to offer a series of workshops followed by a year of coaching for those teachers. And so extending the support in that way so that they could really have kind of deeper relationships with PCM, the Philly Children's Movement people, to have a better understanding of the practices that we were working on, I think was really important and transformational for the efficacy of that work, so that it could be kind of more sustained and integrated into the classroom.
That's right. Yeah, sustainability. I I fully agree. And yeah, even working in a sustained environment with in-service teachers myself, even in the classroom. Like, so as a educator, I've worked with teachers who are in service in through their master's programs, right? And found that even if we're just looking at a 15-week experience, right? Now it's arranged a little differently,
Yep.
right? Because they can do some reading in between, they have projects to complete, etc. And that might be the case with your organization as well. But it's for a grade. So, but in that sustained environment where we're constantly looking and re-looking at mindsets, behaviors, exposing them to new strategies, different frameworks for thinking about what education is and the higher purpose that we're serving, that I would say 99% of the students have left that experience changed.
Mm. Yeah.
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 You
That's what
know,
we want.
that's right. And change for the better.
Right.
And I only say 99% because I think that there are people who enter that experience saying, I'm just trying to get my degree, and they will be limited, right, by what they gain from the experience,
Mhm. Yeah.
So yeah, I built the framework of my signature program for my company for Perceptions Unlimited on the base of the work that I was doing with in-service teachers for, gosh, now it's been what, 17 years.
Wow.
But really looked at, hey, people are changing when we do X, Y, and Z, so let's do that
Right.
for more people. That's why I wanted to change it to a training or integrate it into a training because, well, I have the skills of a master trainer uh, to ensure that, but it's built on, evidence that people have shifted,
Right.
and you want them to not need you, right? Like you
Right.
want them
Right.
to be able to be independent and work when you're gone.
Right.
And so many educators have experienced that. But then, of course, for me, I was like, oh, that's not enough, right? We need to reach some more institutions. So let me come out and work with people outside of it. Well, enough about me. I want the people to know more about these practical strategies that you have helped people integrate into their work. So, if you could, can you describe, some practical strategies for maybe working with scripted curriculum, for example?
Sure. Yeah.
Mhm.
Um, so much of I think the pressures that educators are under can lead to them feeling really constrained and like there's they don't have a lot of options. They don't have a lot of choices. Um, they're so overworked that there's just no time to integrate other things or to make changes that even if they know, there are things that they would want to do differently, there might not be the time or capacity to make those changes. And so with the Philly Children's Movement, one thing that we really look for is helping educators find the places that they do have choice, they do have agency and can implement different options depending on their knowledge of their students and where they really want to go with things. So in particular, we use this framework that we call the radical morning meeting, which is a kind of modification, adaptation of the responsive classroom morning meeting model. Um, and we sometimes also call it a radical circle or radical morning circle. It's something that isn't limited to the younger grades. It can also be extended into homeroom or advisory or we've even had people beyond the classroom integrate it into meeting structure, um, or kind of organizational practices.
Mhm.
Um, and the concept behind the radical morning meeting is that we can be really intentional about choosing different aspects of what we're doing with students to center identity, joy, and justice. Um, and that because the morning meeting or homeroom time is often when teachers have the most choice of what goes on, that can be a time when they really start to anchor the classroom community in those things that I named, identity, joy, and justice.
Mhm.
So listeners might be familiar with the morning meeting kind of model, and it has the six components. Radical morning meeting also has six components that are named a little bit differently, often centered on a text. And we think of text really very inclusively. Doesn't have to be a book. Sometimes we like to joke about a TikTok or
Mhm.
a meme or a tweet or a Zeet or whatever they're called could be a text. Um, Something that connects to students' identities, connects to their communities, or to the world around them. Um, and then this would often be connected as well to uh, kind of calling back to ancestors of the students' communities. So
Mhm.
kind of grounding in who their people are.
Mhm.
Um, we often talk about kind of historical figures from the communities that of the students as centered in Radical Morning Meeting. Um, and kind of using that as an opportunity to draw parallels between things that have happened in the past and the present. So we're
Mhm.
getting kind of that history piece and really helping students understand the world around them just by being intentional about how we are talking about and framing the text that we're using or the people that we're choosing to highlight during that morning time.
Mhm. Okay. And so I'm just curious, right? Because we always have to be really, really concrete uh,
Yes.
for people. I don't know, pick a grade or, it could be advisory or whatever. Like you said that you pick a text. So what's a potential, I don't know, TikTok that you might organize a theme around?
Sure.
What's a potential one?
I can't think of a TikTok.
Okay.
I'm not on
Okay.
TikTok.
Okay.
But I can think of many, for example, picture books
Okay.
tend to be a common one. So in PCM, we use The Day You Begin, The Undefeated a lot, Jabari Jumps a lot.
Okay.
We've also had several teachers go on to implement a radical morning meeting around Black Panther.
Mm.
That is not a picture book, obviously. And
Okay.
so doing an activity where they watch kind of clips from Black Panther and then choose which characters they most strongly identify with,
Get
talk
their
about
identity.
Chadwick Boseman and kind of his legacy and
Mhm.
things that he's kind of stated and what that means for them.
Mhm.
Um, and obviously, Black Panther itself as a text is hugely rich and something that we can analyze and think about in a lot of depth as it relates to social issues. And
Mhm.
it's something that a lot of students are really, really excited to do and talk about, and gets conversation started in an exciting way.
Yeah. And what grade level is this?
We've done the Black Panther RMM, I think in eighth
Eighth
grade.
grade. Okay.
But I could imagine that being used in middle and high school kind of broadly, depending on
Right.
maybe what clips you use.
Okay. And the reason why I asked is because a number of people will think that grappling with social issues is not for the first grader. And many of us disagree.
Many of us do.
Right, because
Yes,
they're walking out into the world and social issues are right in their faces.
yes.
And I know a number of early childhood educators focus in on fairness, but you'd be surprised what a 6-year-old and a 7-year-old can grapple with, or the complexity of some um, social issues that affect their lives.
Hmm.
Yeah, I've
Yeah.
seen that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm a very big fan of not dumbing things down, and I think people often tend to use the framing of developmental appropriateness in a
Mhm.
way that is just really trying to get away from things that are uncomfortable. Um, but I 100% agree with you that our littlest people,
Mhm.
they know, they see, and they just learn that it's not okay to talk about. And so being intentional and thoughtful about how we're talking about things, often through text, can be one way to start to navigate that.
Mhm.
Um, in one classroom that we worked with, it was a first grade classroom, and our PCM coach kind of co-led a radical morning meeting around Nina Simone. So they read a picture book about her, um, and the students wrote responses to the question, "What lyric does the world need to hear?"
Mm.
And they came up with just some really beautiful and sometimes hilarious things to say. I think one student said, like, you know, don't kill people. I love pancakes.
Okay.
Things like that, right? Okay, the world needs to hear that. The world needs to know you love pancakes. And yeah, don't kill people.
Right.
Um, and just such a classic and wonderful child response
Mhm.
that really shows the layers of how they're able to think about things and move between themselves and their communities and the text that they've just read and the kind of present reality. Super interesting. Um, and also the fact that they were aware that people kill people.
Exactly.
That was not something that the teacher had stated, but that was something that the students, came organically from them. In fact, multiple students mentioned violence and killing as
Mm.
something that was on their mind.
Wow. Yeah, and that's so important. And I don't want the thought that joy to be missed in this
Yes,
conversation, right? Like, how are we centering joy
yes,
for this justice?
right, right. Yeah, I think I've seen increased conversation and dialogue about joy recently, I feel, which is so wonderful. Um, in the Radical Morning Meeting framework, there is a component of the framework called the recreation. Each of the six components has a shun ending. So we've got some some nice parallelism there. And the recreation is what it sounds like an activity that is intentional about building community. Even in the traditional morning meeting approach, we want to talk about like students should greet each other by name.
Mhm.
So things like that, like really thinking about how students are invited to see each other as people.
Mhm.
Um, but a recreation activity is something that can also be at the center of the framework, something that will get students moving potentially, um, have fun, laughing. So oftentimes it seems like conversations about social and racial justice they can be depressing or heavy or feel like everything is bad and there's nothing we can do about it. But children have such beautiful imaginations and their creativity is so boundless that often just reframing to think about like, well, what do you want to see? What would be better?
Mhm.
What makes you feel good? What makes you feel safe? Who do you feel safe with? Um,
Mhm.
and thinking of it kind of as an aspirational, what do we want the world to be like, rather than let's sit down and analyze all the problems of this world, can be one really powerful shift and reframe to center joy.
Yes. I mean, can you imagine just even the world we would have now if we were focused from an early age on imagining this world different and better
Hmm.
than we received it,
Yes,
right? Like if we were training our minds, training young minds to think about that, I mean, that takes intention and it's at every level and more often than not that we would have more adults who could think that way,
right,
right?
right.
Oftentimes, I know I come into spaces, we've been in spaces together, and I might sound like a little hopeful. It seems pie in the sky to people. Thankfully, I think that was nurtured in me, intentionally or not, but it was nurtured by a number of different things, right? So, in my spiritual tradition and also in my schooling and education, and the people in my family who just believed that I could do anything that I set my mind to. And so all of those things came together for me to say, hey, like we can if we do, right? Like,
Mhm.
and I understand that we're interdependent. We need to come together. That's not something new, right? We are always building community in schools, but we're not helping people understand that in community we can we can make change.
Mhm.
Building community is a change process as it is.
Yes, yeah,
But that, keeping people focused on the future and not fear,
yeah,
or focused on their agency versus what they can't control. Yeah, you can't do anything about it by yourself, but looking at the history of people who have done the thing and what they did was in community, in
right,
coalition, right?
right.
And it was across many different lines of identities as
Hmm.
well. If we don't continue to have this barrier that somehow those identities are what distance us.
Right, right. And I do feel like we are lucky in to be living in a time when finding people is easier than it has been in the past.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I'm not on TikTok, but people find each other on TikTok, and that is a wonderful thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and there are so many resources out there now for people to connect with each other in ways that can really sustain what they're trying to do and reduce the isolation and the kind of siloing that can often happen and really be a significant barrier to this.
Yes.
And so that is a pro of the time that we're living in.
Yes, indeed, it is. And I want to hear from you around like some just general advice you would give to someone, in addition to what you shared already, who is looking to improve themselves, like improve their anti-racist, culturally competent, or inclusive practices. What is like the next best step one would take if they haven't begun or they've been lukewarm?
Yeah. I guess one thing that really comes to mind, and this kind of tracks with some of what we've talked about today, is just the importance of starting small.
Hmm.
It doesn't need to be like, I've done nothing and now I'm going to try to do everything. But starting small, and really, I believe in the importance of knowing oneself first.
Hmm.
Um, People read books and they do identity wheels and these kinds of things, but I wonder the depth of some of those kinds of activities, um, because knowing yourself is uncomfortable. You might find things that you don't want to find. And you might find things about your family or your community or where you grew up that aren't fun and don't feel good. And I think being honest with yourself about how willing and ready are you to find those things and to talk about those things and to just acknowledge them and understand how they impact your work, I think that is a really important starting point. Um, what are you willing to learn? What are you willing to risk learning about? Because it's not going to feel good, and that's okay. If it felt good, then change wouldn't happen. Um,
Right.
so I think that kind of honesty with oneself is a really important starting point.
First step. Yes, it is. And I will say this, over the years, advocating for other people's children, I didn't always, I was pretty self-aware, but I didn't always accept the
Mm.
good, the bad, and the ugly.
Yeah, it's hard. It's
Right?
hard.
It is hard work, but let me tell you, I'm reformed. Like I feel freer in my own body
Mm.
and confident in my own thoughts and what I will say and share in the world because I did the work to even accept the
Yeah,
good, the bad, and the ugly, right? It's
yeah,
not to be self-deprecating, but it's to be honest.
yeah.
And sometimes that takes help from an outside source,
Hmm.
whether you're reading a book or you're getting coaching or you're in a class, right? Like sometimes, I would say a lot of times, it takes help from an outside source
Yeah,
because our egos are resisting it, right? Like just how we are designed as human beings, there's something resisting
yeah.
that deeper look. But then we have all of the messaging that we are receiving in the world that often leads us to self-deprecating versus saying, no, this is me. That looks a little funky,
Hmm.
but it's part of who I am. Now I
Right,
can do something to change it if I want.
right, right,
Do I want to?
right, right,
you know?
right.
But I do believe that the majority of people that are on this planet want the best for themselves and other people. I don't believe that about everyone, but I believe the majority of us do.
Yeah.
And we don't understand how culture, right? Like the things in our culture that are, and many of those things are unseen, like they're unconscious for us, help us move in directions that are not toward that goal.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. Mhm,
And I think that requires holding a lot of tension.
mhm.
Um, and really, it's so easy, especially for educators who are constrained and overworked, to
Mhm.
fall into kind of black and white thinking.
Yes.
Um, and I think that really being as careful as we can about avoiding that, to hold the tension and just be okay with, this is really not good, but this part is good.
Mhm.
Or this is not good, but I'm going to do something about it. And just kind of maintaining that awareness of two things can be true at once,
Yes.
um, is so important, for movement and growth.
Yes, it is. Excellent. Excellent. And I don't want it to be lost on our listeners. You mentioned that there's a framework that has six components that the Philly Children's Movement work is guided by.
Mhm.
Can you share the framework, right? Like not all of the ins and outs of how they work, but just like what are these steps or the parts of the framework that
Sure.
so
Yeah.
that for people who are curious, because we want them to check out the Philly Children's Movement.
Yes, we do. We
Yes.
sure do. Yeah. So, the framework has these six components that don't need to be in any particular order. We often encourage educators to mix up the order depending on their needs, or even to, do the six parts at different times of day if they have not enough time to do a full radical morning meeting.
Mhm.
And as I said, they're often kind of organized around a text, but these components definitely don't have to be. Um, they are appreciation. So in that part, each participant is welcomed into the group. As I said, say each other's names. We want people to feel seen. Recreation, a fun kind of community and joy centered activity, could be really anything.
Mhm.
Um, Inspiration, connecting with elders and ancestors, and or kind of current events. And this could be, or, potentially both, drawing connections between elders and current events. The narration is where a text is read or watched or otherwise engaged with. A text could be a lot of things. Um, Vibration, participants are kind of thinking just on their own about the text. That could be kind of a quiet reflection or jotting down of notes.
Mhm.
And then what we do recommend being at the end is the affirmation, a call and response, where there is some kind of consistent chant or mantra, often led by students, sometimes designed or written by students, that kind of is grounding and brings things together, so that the community feels kind of centered and like, they've got each other. This is how we are connected through this chant.
That's awesome. Awesome. So I got appreciation. I think I took it out of your order, but appreciation, inspiration, narration, recreation, vibration, and affirmation.
And recreation.
Yeah, I said it somewhere in
Oh,
there. But
I might have
yeah,
missed
out
it.
of the
Sorry.
order. That's okay. That is okay. So, yes, so that is a frame for radicalizing that morning meeting
Hmm.
and to bring joy back into your classroom, to bring joy back into it for you too,
Oh,
right? Like for
yes.
the adult that is listening to this, imagine going to work and enjoying it again.
Hmm.
Yeah, so I really encourage people to check out the Philly Children's Movement. Luca, how can we get connected to that movement?
Yeah. So if you just Google Philly Children's Movement, um, or our website is phillychildrensmovement.org, phillychildrensmovement at gmail.com. Um, if you do send an email, I'll probably be the one to be reading and responding to that email. So I would love to hear from you. And we're also on social media, same name.
Philly Children's Movement.
You got it.
All right, excellent. Any final words of advice? Any other resources you would like to recommend for further learning?
I guess I will do a quick shout out, and Rochelle, you know about our book. Um, and later this year, I don't have an exact date yet, but the community of practice that I coordinate and that Rochelle is a part of has been working on a book called Transformative Teacher Education: Disrupting Pedagogy, Practice, and Ideology to Forge Culturally Relevant and Sustaining Education. Um,
Mhm.
and it is sort of higher ed at the center, but really cuts across the education ecosystem to think about culturally relevant and sustaining education broadly. And that will be a great resource for anyone who's looking to deepen their work in this area.
Yes, wonderful. And you listeners may have heard us use the term culturally relevant sustaining education. That is a term that we created in Pennsylvania. It crosses over culturally relevant, culturally responsive, and culturally sustaining education concepts. And so people call it different things in different states. I do encourage people to check out the Pennsylvania Educator Diversity Consortium for our definition. And listen, we learned from the folks in New York as we were starting our work. Don't put any limits on what you can learn or to how to do this work. I know that the people in Illinois, particularly in Chicagoland, are doing a lot of great work as well. Illinois has standards around culturally relevant, culturally responsive education as well. And the Pennsylvania Educator Diversity Consortium, I'm going to hopefully not butcher this, and I will put it in the show notes, can be found at paeddiversity.org, right?
I think
So
that's right.
that's PAEDDIVERSITY.org. Luca, I want to thank you so much for being so generous with your time, your expertise. This has been phenomenal. I really enjoyed this conversation with you.
Thank you. I did too, and I'm so grateful and honored to have had the opportunity to speak with you.
Hmm. Well, we are going to continue to build together, and I want to thank everyone who stopped by. Please leave a comment, subscribe, and share this episode. And thank you all again and again for listening to Rooted to Thrive.